Buprenorphine, or B2. Not this B2. This is a drug designed for people that have opioid addiction, and it helps them quit. And it's in the category of painkillers. Buprenorphine is used in different ways: pills, patches, and syringes. To understand the history of buprenorphine, we have to go to the United Kingdom and compare to methadone, which we've made a video on it previously. It's much newer. Methadone was made in the 1930s in Germany, but B2 was designed in England in the 1970s. In the year 1969, a British company by the name of Reckitt Benckiser told its scientists that we need another form of morphine, and they specifically ordered to make the drug less addictive. This is the same thing Germans did, but in return they created heroin and methadone. After doing all these research, eventually in the year 1978, the British company finally finalized the buprenorphine drug. In the beginning, it was in syringe form, and it was sent to hospitals as painkillers. 4 years later, in the year 1982, they successfully sold it in pill form, and that means they could sell it outside of hospitals now. Around the same time, Reckitt Benckiser supplied these pills all around the world. When we get to the year 2000s is when the Americans finally realized that they could use this for drug addicts, so it could help addicts quit their addiction. And 2 years later, FDA, or Food Drug Administration, approved it for opioid disorders. 4 years later, the Europeans approve it as well. After the Europeans approve it, buprenorphine is sent everywhere in the world as an opioid disorder drug, and it helps addicts quit. The Americans and the Europeans approved the drug, but it was very strict to get it. First of all, they wouldn't give it to any pharmacy. Second of all, the doctor would have to be a professional, and they would have to have a good reason to prescribe it to a patient. And the person that receives the drug, it has to help with their heroin addiction, not any other types of addiction. In the year 2018, they created the patches as well, and that was used in different ways. If you've seen our video about methadone or know about the drug, you know that it's a terrible pill, but let's compare these two together. We have to say methadone and buprenorphine are pretty much very similar in what they do. They have very negative effects on the human body, and the effects it has is pretty similar. This is the idea of different scientists, but some physicians believe that B2 does less damage than methadone on the human body. But there's some other people that say no, methadone does less damage, because they believe that buprenorphine damages the lung harder than methadone. And based on research, that seems like it's true, because a lot of B2 users suffer from lung disease. Methadone does put a lot of pressure and damage on your organs, but it does less damage to your lungs than buprenorphine. So buprenorphine is not that much better than methadone, and most people that use this drug to get off of opioids, they're just replacing an addiction with another addiction. This drug is used all over the world, but the stats we have is only for the US and Europe. Just like we said, it's very hard to get this drug, and between all them, France is the only country that easily prescribes B2 to patients. And that is why in France, the stats of overdosing is the highest out of any country. We have to say that the patches is mostly used for chronic pain, not for opioid addiction. If people suffer from chronic pain, some doctors may prescribe this patch. And it's interesting to know, instead of morphine, some vets use ibuprofen syringes for painkillers for dogs and cats. But the dog won't be like a human, where it'll crave to get some B2 again. The side effects that methadone gave, B2 does it as well, like constipation, nausea, feeling tired, but it's very hard to fall asleep. And taking B2 with other drugs or alcohol is very dangerous, and it could even lead to death. It's very easy to overdose on this drug even with the patch. Compared to methadone, B2 does less damage on kidney, and that is why people that suffer from kidney disease, they're prescribed B2 for that reason instead of methadone. But in terms of the liver, both methadone and B2 could do serious damage to a person's liver in a long term. The long term of effects of B2 risks your liver and lungs. In the US is very strict in getting buprenorphine, and you can't get it easily from the doctor. But the problem is, it's very available in the streets, and anybody that wants it can get it. And this is the reason a lot of addicts are addicted to this pill, because it's so available. Doctors believe that the withdrawals of B2 are less severe than methadone, opium, and heroin, but it's not like it's a magic pill and it helps you get clean with no problem. To get off this pill and other drugs, you have to be responsible, and your goal has to be to get clean rather than take this forever. The biggest problem with these pills is that it's available in the streets and you don't need prescription for it. And that is why some of the physicians that prescribe B2 to their patients, they have to keep up on how they're using it. Since it's available everywhere, the patient could stop listening to the doctor and stop going to them, and just buy buprenorphine off the streets and take it. And unfortunately, this is when an addict reaches a terrible spot, because they just made their opioid addiction into a worse form. To get off this drug, you have to talk to an experienced doctor, a doctor that actually wants to help you, and they have to monitor you, and they have to keep asking questions throughout the month to see how you're doing. But unfortunately, there are some doctors that are not interested in helping an addict, and they're just interested in the money. If a doctor wants to help an addict, they have to get to know the patient. They have to have a series of questions to see how the addict uses and lives his or her life. If they get to know it, they can predict on how to help them get clean. And with these controlled pills, they can help them slowly get off. But after talking to a doctor for a minute and he hands you a prescription, they're not really trying to help you. There's no written rule on how to treat an opioid addiction. So if the doctor doesn't know you, they really don't know what they're doing. The only time they can help you is if they got to know you and your habits. The best doctors around the world believe if you follow these steps, anybody can quit. And if they're not helped correctly, unfortunately, the addict can go back to their roots again. The most important part about getting clean is that you want to get clean. If the person doesn't want it, it won't happen. We wish you all the best, and I hope this video was informative.